am John Adams with Cityside, and I'm a licensed spiritual practitioner, and we're doing spiritual conversations. And right now, I had the great good fortune of sitting down and having a conversation with our own Reverend Aimee Daniels. And so here comes Amy with her words of wisdom on Election Day. All right. Well, I am so excited to be sitting down and talking with our own Reverend Aimee Daniels. And this is about our vision for America. And we've been talking with our various spiritual leaders about all the different energies, consciousness, concerns, maybe fears that are floating around in the sort of group think or the race thinking that's going on right now, and just asking, and I'll ask you, Amy, to just speak to, what is the consciousness that we really need to hold in mind when we're dealing with something like COVID, for example, where cases are rising and so forth, and there's certainly room for fear there. What's the consciousness we should be shooting for?
Great. Well, and certainly in our lifetimes, we've never faced something like COVID. So I think it's really important just to presence that there is a lot of disruption in people's lives right now because of COVID. And I'm going to talk specifically about health. And what I want to say about it is, spiritually, um, we would say that COVID is not a thing, meaning COVID is not an entity unto itself outside of God. If you think about New Thought and the leaders of New Thought early on, the people who really brought it forth, many of them had had personal healings
Right.
using the teachings of New Thought. And basically, the teaching would be that there is wholeness, that everything is within God. There is no entity outside of God. So COVID is not an entity outside of God. And when we practice this, when we bring this into our prayer practice or our meditation, what we're really going for is to know the wholeness that is our true nature. So if I were to pray for you, or if you were to pray for yourself, I might make my affirmation, my realization statement say, I know that I'm one with the divine blueprint of health. I know that wholeness and health are in every cell of my being. I think the early New Thoughters would have also done a denial. They would have said, I deny that this thing called COVID has any power over my experience of health. And they would affirm that perfect health is theirs now. And I know it sounds a little cotton candy to say that, but just think about other health scares that maybe you've had in your life, things that maybe you were afraid of. Like I had a cancer scare um, probably 12 years ago. And my doctor was really quite convinced that I was going to get cancer because I had some irregular cells. And I remember at the time I was praying with a friend of mine who happens to be a minister. And I remember so specifically when she prayed for me, she said, this is not a thing. These cells are not a thing, that your body is restored to its natural wholeness. And what it helped me with was to let go of my fear, because just like COVID, anytime we have something in our body that seems like it's not right, it activates our fear. So spiritually, we really want to get ourselves out of that deactivated place. So we talked about this in service a few weeks ago. Like what happens when we get triggered? We go down to the lower part of our brain, which is our survival part of our brain. We're in fear. A lot of times we're feeding the thoughts of fear ourselves, right? Because it's hard to break out of it. But what do you do when that happens, right? What do you do when you're in that fear? You need to pause, you need to breathe, you need to calm yourself down and come back to the place where you're able to access, can't talk, access that conscious place of creation that we go to when we pray. Go into affirmation about the health, the wholeness, the healing that's happening in our bodies, just knowing. And also, I would also say pray for safety. If you're not sick, I would just say, I know I'm divinely protected. I know that I'm always cared for. And if you're really in a place, the other thing I would say is if you're really in a place where you're so activated by what's going on, please reach out and get some prayer from a friend. You know, write to prayer at cityside.me. We'll hook you up with a practitioner. But like, you don't need to do this by yourself. That's why we're together in community. And we know that prayer is the most powerful thing to shift what we're experiencing in the world of form. And so I think my biggest solution is take it to prayer and get some support in doing that.
That's beautiful. I love it. I'm just going to breathe that in and say yes to that. One of the things that has shown up in the world of forum and in our lives has been the way power has played itself out in our society lately. And I think the reason why it can be triggering is because it can make those of us who are experiencing it feel powerless.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder about that in terms of if someone were coming to you to say, I feel really powerless in whatever it is, maybe it's COVID, maybe it's other things in life. What's the prayer request there? What's the higher consciousness we would call forward?
Feel powerless. Well, first of all, I think that I would remind you of spiritual truth, which
Mm,
is that
yeah,
there's no power other than spirit, God, whatever word you use. Like there is, no power over you outside of God, right? So I think I would start in principle. And, I think also too, this is where you need to get a little practical because, none of us love some of the things we're seeing right now. I mean, I think this is a time where we've seen a lot of bad behavior. We've seen a lot of misuse of power. We've seen a lot of name calling and making other people wrong. And let's just be honest, it's hard to watch.
right,
It's very difficult to watch and not feel like this is just flat wrong, right? And so, what I notice in myself is it's really easy for me to get into judgment, and be like effing this and that, or just be like, this is not right, But what do I need to do so that I don't let my power be given to that, right? Because if I get triggered, then I'm allowing it to be an entity in my life, right? And God, and we don't even consider God an entity, right? It's the allness, that we live within. And you might say the quantum field that we live within. So, I don't want to give my energy to believing in something that isn't that, and it doesn't mean that I'm not going to continue to, from time to time, have these experiences in the world of form, but it's really what do I do with them when they happen, right? So if someone came and said, I'm really feeling powerless, again, I would start by let's start with our practice.
right,
Let's get ourselves centered, right? Let's get into our prayer practice and let's get support. Get some support if you need support in your prayer practice. But, I think too, this is something where it's also helpful to think, well, if I felt more powerful, and I mean that from the place of personal power, not like power as we think of power in the world, right? If I felt more personally powerful, what would be the qualities that I would be experiencing,
right.
right? And you really want to pray from that place. So it might be, what's a good quality for powerful? Throw me a quality, John.
I just feel like I can be free in my life because I have this sense of power.
hmm So we might say, I affirm my freedom. I know my freedom. I know my freedom to choose, right? We talked about Viktor Frankl recently. I'm free to choose my response, right? Other people can do this, but that I am free to choose my response. And this isn't your question, but I just want to say something else, especially since I know today's election day that you're watching me. I know a lot of people are struggling with people in their life who don't have the same politics that they do and don't have the same beliefs that they do. And, I think what I really want to say to everyone too is just like honor other people's freedom to choose
Mm,
just as you honor your own. You know, I Rich's mom There was a political discussion happening at dinner a few weeks ago, and one of the people at the table said to Rich's mom, you know, how can you be friends with that person? Because they support the opposite candidate of you. And she said, you know, I'm not going to let one data point in someone's life define my relationship with them.
Mm,
And I thought, God bless you, you know, God bless you, because that's really what we all need to do. We need to recognize that when others have a different point of view than us, even in how they're using their power, right?
right,
How
right,
they choose to use their power in their world, what they think is right and wrong, um, you know, that is informed by their beliefs. It might be informed by the behavior that they see from others, right? Which right now is super magnified, right? You can see it every time you turn around. It's on the TV, it's on the social media. But we can choose to see that person in their wholeness, right? And so let's say I'm in a conversation with that person, instead of being like, how can you believe that? You know, if we can just be more curious, and maybe we can just be honest and say, you know, I just don't share that point of view. I have done that for the past several years because I have some clients I work with who have very different points of view than I do. And I'll listen to them and then I'll say, well, this is how I see it differently. But, you know, I can be in conversation with them because I'm respecting them.
right.
And I
Different
think that, you know, putting our faith in action, that's what we need to do. I'm sorry, John, what were you going to say?
thing, conversation rather than confrontation.
Absolutely. Conversation, not confrontation. You
Yeah.
know, it's like we always talk too about being for something, right? We're for equity for all people,
Hmm.
right? We're for, you know, justice. We are for um, you know, a world that works for everyone. And spiritually, we really want to keep our attention there. And especially today, because regardless of the outcome of the election, whether it's your candidate or someone else, here's what I want to say to you. We're not going to stop fighting for the things we're for,
Right.
right? Even if it were a setback, and you know, God willing, it's not, right? But even if it were a setback, you know, we need to have the same commitment that we've seen from the great civil rights leaders, from Abraham Lincoln, from many other figures over time who were for something important. And we get to be for creating this world that works for everyone. So I just really want to encourage everyone, just keep your faith up, you know, do your practice and just trust that we're calling forth that world right now in spite of appearances.
That is beautiful, powerful message. Thank you so much, Reverend Amy.
You're welcome, John. Thanks for having me here.
So, was I right or was I right? Great conversation. Reverend Amy is always just the best, just terrific. So, such a blessing for us to have her as our senior director, such a blessing to know her and to have her as a friend. Just thank you so much, Reverend Amy. And so, if you find that you need prayer support, remember you can email us at prayer@cityside.me and we will be happy to pray over your prayer request. Or if you need someone to reach out to you and you just need that personal contact, put that in your request as well, and we'll arrange to have somebody contact you. I hope you have a blessed day. Thank you for joining me. Take care.